All right, so right now we're filming the scary scene.
Ready, and action.
The idea for this movie came from a deep-seated fear in doppelgängers. I love the doppelganger mythologies and different movies that have dealt with them. And I just desperately wanted to make my offering to that pantheon of evil double films.
They think like us. They know where we are. They won't stop until they kill us, or we kill them.
Throughout mythology, doppelgangers often represent bad omens or a foreshadowing of one's death. So I just wanted to sort of pinpoint and work off of that just extremely primal fear.
What are you people? We're Americans.
One of the central themes in us is that we can do a good job collectively of ignoring the ramifications of privilege.
They created the tethered so they could use them to control the ones above. Like puppets.
I think it's the idea that what we feel like we deserve comes, you know, at the expense of someone else's freedom or joy. You know, the biggest disservice we can do as a faction with a collective privilege, like the United States, is to presume that we deserve it and that it isn't luck that has us born where we're born. For us to have our privilege, someone suffers. That's where the tethered connection, I think, resonates the most, is that those who suffer and those who prosper are two sides of the same coin. We can never forget that. We have to fight for the less fortunate.
Lost down here, trapped in our loops, too consumed by our obsessions, routines to even see the tether.
This summer, 6 million people will tether themselves together to fight hunger in the United States. Visit your local record shop to find out how you can be a part of Hands Across America.
When I thought to put the Hands Across America in this film is an example of this American duality. That here you have this event. On the one hand, it's a beautiful thing, right? We're all gonna get together, we're gonna hold hands, and somehow that's gonna cure hunger. The illusion that we're contributing to something that actually is making change, as opposed to something that kind of makes us feel better and absolves us of our responsibility to enact actual change.
We made it! Because y'all sleep too much.
I always thought of the family in terms of certain archetypal foursome. You know, Adelaide is the leader, the captain. Zora is the warrior. She acts before she thinks, and she kicks ass. Gabe is the fool, even though on the surface he looks like he might be the leader or the warrior. And Jason is the wizard. He's the magician.
What are you doing?
It's a magic trick. I left it here last year.
Okay, let's see it.
You know, I have this kind of concept of Jason that he can sort of see through the veil. You can see these moments where he's observing his mother, and he's meant to be a little step ahead of us, the most clever of us, that is sort of figuring out something's more to Adelaide's story than we see. You're walking into this unknown place. It's kind of like, yeah, and it's kind of cool, too. There are several stories involving a woman or a young girl going to this other land that inspired some of the imagery in this movie. So Alice in Wonderland, even The Wizard of Oz, and the Nutcracker stands out.
Would you ever wish you kept dancing?
Sometimes, yeah.
The pas de deux, it's a dance that's supposed to be done by two people. It's a duet. Adelaide, in her recital, she decided that she was going to do a version of it with just the one of her. The implication, of course, is that they are actually doing a duet, one above and one below. The animals in my stories represent this battle between science and religion for me. You know, I tend to like to explore the gray area where religion and magic and the unexplainable meet science. Between the two, you have an abomination, a metaphor for humanity. One of the motifs of this movie is the rabbits. They symbolize a lot of different things. The main connection to me was Easter. This story is a dark Easter of sorts. Red is the Messiah who is, rising from the hole that she was left for dead. The deers I used in Get Out and the rabbits I used here, woodland animals where there's something wild and unbridled behind their eyes, but there's also a distinct lack of what makes a human.
We're human too, Eyes, teeth, hands, blood. Exactly like you.
Part of what makes a human being is that we value our family more than the one across the street. We can't be beings of good exclusively when in our DNA we have this idea of tribalism. That's at odds with any attempt to paint ourselves as inherently good beings. We're animals. We were built a certain way by evolution. These things are in our DNA for survival. And right there, the notion of good and evil versus the notion of what we are for survival, well, that's right where this idea of science and religion meet. And the human monster is the abomination in the middle.
That's crazy. Been having so many crazy coincidences lately.
In this movie, the idea of coincidence, you can look at the event that is the creation of the tethered, sort of creating a rift in the fabric of the universe. As they get closer, coincidences pop up. Part of it, to me, I think, is what we're ready to see and our hunger to connect the dots, but to suggest that when you have one of those little small connections that seems perfectly serendipitous, it might not be. It might be more. Religion is scary to me. There is an us tied into the fabric of most religions. The connection to the Jeremiah 11:11, I think sort of represents Red's voice, this war cry of sorts. Pluto, Jason's doppelganger backing into the fire with his arms stretched out, sort of in the crucifix position. And Red names her family. Abraham, she chose a name that as a 7-year-old child, she learned was the great emancipator. And that's kind of her family's role, is this sort of royal family in a demonstration of freedom and emancipation. Obviously, there's a biblical connection there, too.
And then there was us.
There's this expanding idea of what the word us means. Us can mean many different things. The only thing consistent about the idea of us is when you have an us, you have a them. Every one of us and our doppelganger share a soul. We have a fated connection that isn't always exact. I described it as being a sort of poetic connection. Fate and the magic of the soul doesn't work in a sort of scientifically dependable way, which is one of the reasons the underpass as a concept didn't work for the creators. We got a good actor here, we got a good actor here. I think all great horror has a social message of some sort. When it works, it's because it's tapping into something that we're suppressing. As a society, as individuals, horror is often grounded, which is the way I love to do comedy as well. Allow something crazy to be going on, but you try to marry it with reality. And so that's really what I'm going for here. I have a definite world of symbols that I'm exploring and trying to say with this film, all relating to our duality as human beings, the guilt and sins that we bury deep within ourselves.